This is a presentation that keeps evolving. I feel like it's evolving, like every week, given what's happening in the marketplace. But what we wanted to do was just spend some time going through some of the issues that we are all grappling with right now when it comes to um, music, the policy and the music industry adapting to AI and AI music services. I'm not sure how many of you have sort of played around with sort of the different types of services that are out there right now. So we'll do a couple of demos, and then we'll just walk through each of the issues and how we're trying to grapple with them, and where they're being addressed. And then finally, I want to make sure that I leave time for some Q&A. So Sam, if you don't mind teeing up the presentation, we'll start with the demos. And I'm going to put these on so I can see what's going on. All right. If you don't mind going to the first one, this sort of illustrates the issues with voice and likeness. And we'll talk a lot about the policy part of that. But this is one of the services that originally posed some of the difficulties for artists who are grappling with their voice being used without their permission, in particular commercial services. It's part of a much bigger issue on deepfakes, where faces and voices are being used on everything from social media to covers. This service is called Voice Dub. I don't know how many of you have seen it or been able to play around with it, but it's a very easy interface. If you don't mind playing the movie, Sam, we'll just sort of take a look at how it works. This was recorded in real time. As you can see, you just click Make Voice Dub Now, and you choose a voice that you want. We're going to choose Hank Hill because very distinctive voice. But as you can see, lots of models by users of Voice Dub have been posted, and you can pick the voice model that you want. And then all you do is you take a URL that you copy from YouTube on any song you want, and you put it in. In this case, we're going to put Thunder Rolls by Garth Brooks, and that's it. You choose the voice, you choose the song by putting in YouTube, and now you're going to hear Hank Hill singing Thunder Rolls.
3:30 in the morning, not a soul in sight. The city's looking like a ghost town on a moonlit summer night. Raindrops on the windshield, there's a storm moving, yeah. He's heading back from somewhere that he never should have been. And the thunder rolls, yeah. And the thunder rolls.
All right. So we can hit stop on that. The reason why I chose Hank Hill is because those of you who have watched King of the Hill, he has a very distinctive voice, so you can sort of very easily hear how they've imposed those vocals onto Garth Brooks's song. But you can do it with anybody, right? You can do it with Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande, any artist that you want to choose, as long as a model has been posted onto the site. You can choose the model. You can choose anything that you rip from YouTube for the song, and next thing you know, you've got a cover. The only problem is that the artist never consented to their voice being used in that manner, never chose to do that cover, and nobody is getting paid, right? From the songwriter who has the underlying composition to the artist who would otherwise license the performance. Okay, so one illustration. The next is Suno, and this is, oh, just stop it for one sec, Sam. I just want to set it up. Sorry about that. Many of you have heard of Suno. There are lots of lawsuits against Suno, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But Suno is a music generator, and so it operates just on a prompt. And you can do a few of them for free, and then there's a more premium service, two premium services, one that allows you to generate a lot of songs, one that allows you to utilize tools. So you can basically put in any prompt you want and generate any song that you want. So for those of you who haven't played around on it, sorry, go ahead now, Sam. We're just going to play a real-time video of how you do it. I'm going to type in a country song about the simple life. I just wanted to type in the easiest, most simple thing to see what it does. And there you have it. It's going to prepare artwork, lyrics, and a performance all within a few seconds. And it's going to play it for you right now. This one is called Simple as the Sky, based on my prompt.
Sun comes up, paints the barn gold. Coffee's hot, stove's burning low. A rooster's calling, it's time to rise. Simple as the sky, simple as the sky. No city lights, no traffic sound. Just a gravel road and solid ground. It's the simple life where the heart runs free. A little dirt on my hands, but that's just me with the stars at night and the field so wide.
All right, I think you
I'm living right.
So if that sounded like a country radio hit, it's because Suno has copied every country radio hit, analyzed the patterns of those songs that have reached success, and then they copy the structure of the lyrics, the pre-chorus, and the chorus. Same thing with lyrics, same thing with the voice that you hear. So basically, Suno has trained on a catalog of tens of millions of songs, none of which they acquired permission for, and none of which they give compensation to the songwriter or the performer or the label or the publisher for. But they do charge a subscription. And then the person who creates those songs, and depending on your like what tier you are on, you can generate X amount of songs a day. You can then upload them through DistroKid or TuneCore onto, 400 global digital music services. And if you look at some of the statistics that Deezer has put out, a large percentage of what's being uploaded by aggregators onto digital music providers are AI generated songs and services like Suno that then, of course, compete against the human created songs, and also can get into algorithms and things like that. So big issue. We'll talk about sort of the policy and the legal part of it in a second, but I just wanted you to see how quick it is and how fast it can work. Okay, many of you may have heard of the Velvet Sundown, which is an AI band. This is pretty interesting because Velvet Sundown popped kind of early, maybe a novelty. We'll see. They went from 400,000 monthly listeners on Spotify in December to 148,000 now. So, seems to be sort of tampered down a bit, maybe because, they're not generating other AI music that they're putting out, maybe for other reasons. Well, time will tell. But I just want to play you Dust on the Wind, which has 1.8 million streams on Spotify. So you can kind of hear what they've generated on Suno and what they're putting their name on.
Dust on the wind, boots on the ground, smoke in the sky, no peace found. Rivers run red, the drums roll slow. Tell me, brother, where do we go? Raise your hand, don't look away.
All right, so
Sing out
Velvet Sundown
loud.
actually released an album, as you can see, Floating on Echoes, with several recordings on that particular album, as an artist would release an album, but obviously it is all AI generated. There are no musicians, no actual performers represented on this album release. But one of the first to release an album with sort of a theme and to pop on Spotify. All right, the next example you may have heard of. Her name, the AI's name is Zanaya Monáe. To me, it sounds like a blend between Shania Twain and Janelle Monáe. So maybe even the name was sort of like taken from that. But Zanaya Monáe was the first AI artist to debut on a Billboard radio chart. So this was important because AI songs and albums had popped up on the download chart. But as you know, the download chart is a very small number. And so doesn't necessarily, it's not really an indicator that the needle has been moved in the larger music community. But debuting on the radio chart certainly does move the needle. So the song was called How Was I Supposed to Know? Right now, Zanaya Monáe has 980,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. There are lots of artists who would like to have 980,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Not only did How Was I Supposed to Know appear on the Billboard radio chart, but also got onto the R&B digital song sales chart, hot gospel songs, hot R&B songs, emerging artist charts. So now AI music is taking a spot on lots of different charts. And as you know, anybody who represents an artist, those chart spots are tough to get. They are very valuable. So any chart spot taken by a quote unquote AI artist is a chart spot that is not taken by a human artist. 44.4 million total US streams. That's about $52,000 earned in 2 months. Not bad for any emerging artist. The person behind the creation of the AI artist is Talisha Nikki Jones. She's a songwriter. She's a poet who basically goes onto a music generator and takes the lyrics that she's written and she puts the lyrics in and then asks for a performance that is slow tempo R&B, deep female soulful vocals like guitar, heavy drums, etc. That generates the song. And she's the first AI artist, I think, who was signed by an indie label, by a label. Hallwood Media signed her for $3 million. And so there's a reaction from R&B artist Kalani, who is a human competitor, who says there's an AI R&B artist who just signed a multi-million-dollar deal and the person is doing none of the work. So some reaction to how another R&B artist feels about it. All right, next slide. I'm going to just play for you How Was I Supposed to Know? 5.6 million plays on Spotify. Take a listen.
Didn't walk me down no stairs. Didn't warn me about them boys who wouldn't care. Didn't tell me what a real man sounds like. So I fell for the ones that lied just right. He never pulled my chair or checked my friends. Never showed me what to lose or what to defend. So I chased love with an open wound, looking for something I was never introduced to. Mama did her best, but she can't teach what it feels like when a father speaks. So I took every
Okay, so you can see for anybody who is a Kalani fan why she might be upset. There are some striking similarities there. Remember that the songwriter or the poet who wrote the lyrics, who did not otherwise write any other part of the composition and certainly didn't come up with the performance and sort of chose this artwork based on AI to develop an avatar for her AI artist, basically is mimicking very typical R&B anthem structure, which is taken by Suno analyzing the most successful R&B songs that match the prompt. So just anybody who's an R&B fan, you can sort of see if you agree and compare it. Okay, next slide. Just wanted to show you, based on sort of our discussion preliminarily on the charts, that this is definitely a trend. It is not limited to R&B. It is not limited to folk. It's not limited to rock. It's not limited to country. Many genres. I would say other right now than sort of jazz and blues. Every single other genre, there are quote unquote AI artists who are now taking spots on the charts, whether or not it is Christian music, gospel music, country music, rock music. There are lots of examples now. But that's why this presentation keeps morphing, because every time we do it, we're trying to spot and sort of update something based on some of the charts. And great point on streaming fraud. That is definitely a piece of it. We'll talk about that. All right, next slide. Okay, just to create some context here for you, you probably know this, but just ChatGPT has 800 million weekly active users, 2.5 billion prompts each day globally. This is a large language model, obviously. More than 330 million daily prompts come from the United States. So that's about equal to the population of the United States, right? So if we think infants and like 90-year-olds are not doing this, then that is several prompts per day in a very core segment of the population. So it's here to stay, right? Nobody is doubting. Everybody is adapting. $13 billion annual revenue run rate for just OpenAI. Of course, that's not Anthropic. That's not Google Gemini. That's not Meta's Llama. That is just ChatGPT. So a giant revenue stream coming into all these companies as a sector compared to the creative industries, or frankly, the social media companies, or frankly, the digital music providers, right? So it is really a giant growing revenue stream that's coming into these AI companies. All right, next slide. So here are the issues. We've tried to divide them into 4 different buckets just to kind of separate them in your mind and then show you kind of how they have been, how they are being dealt with. And, you know, different fora have been used to go after different components. I think that the most important umbrella to remember surrounding all of this is the licensing that's going on in the marketplace, which I think is the biggest mover of the needle. So these are all the policy and the legal issues, but basically the idea here is to secure creators' rights within the AI universe so that marketplace licensing and partnerships can take shape. That's the idea. The first big issue is fair use and training models. These are the Suno lawsuits, the UDO lawsuit. Most of these are being tackled in the courts. I think most creators believe that the rights already exist. There's no reason to create a new right. The right has survived lots of iterations of new technologies and should remain constant regardless of the development of new technologies. The argument on the AI company side is that because this is input and it's used for training and the output is different than the input, they're not a distribution service like Spotify. They're not distributing the person's music, the creator's music. They are transforming it into something new, and therefore they have a fair use argument to take it without permission and compensation. As you can imagine, the creators say that is not the case. The biggest factor in fair use, which happens to be the 4th factor for you lawyers out there, is that it has to be based on fair competition, right? It can't take a song and have a detrimental economic impact on the creator of that song. And so when you take an artist's place on the charts, when you compete alongside an artist on the same digital music provider, in the creator's view, you are having a detrimental, cannibalizing impact on the and diluting impact on the market for that person's work. Therefore, you're not competing fairly, and it's not fair use. That's basically the major argument in the case. So, lots of lawsuits. Meta was sued in a very famous book case. Thomson Reuters news service has also sued. New York Times sued and then subsequently licensed. Anthropic was sued by music publishers. Suno and UDO were sued by record labels. And you may have heard, of course, that there was recently a settlement with Udio by both Universal and Warner. Sony's continuing on in that particular case. So where this leads, we don't know. It'll really depend on whether or not the lawsuits come to fruition and whether or not there is a settlement. But there was a very important part of the Copyright Office report on AI that basically said that if you dilute the market in output, it probably isn't fair use. And that was something that creators hung on to, and that a lot of AI companies did not like. So that's the first big issue, fair use and training models. Second big issue, protecting voice and likeness. This is that voice dub service, but it also goes to all deepfakes. There's really been a legislative response to this, and that's because there is no federal right of publicity voice. Believe it or not, you don't have a right to yourself under federal law, to your own voice, to your own likeness being used. There are several state right of publicity laws that are aimed at advertising, right? You can't take like Elvis's face and put it on a cereal box or something like that. But they're pretty limited, and a lot of it's done under what we call common law, meaning that there's no statute at all. It's just in the courts in the states. This is one where the technology companies, the AI companies, and creators have really been working together at the federal level because it's very difficult to have 50 different right of publicity statutes in 50 different states and to have a global AI service, right? You need one rule that you can abide by. This was helped because creators went to Tennessee and got something called the Elvis Act, which basically was the first right of publicity bill for digital replicas in artificial intelligence. That created the incentive to get it done federally so that there wouldn't be a patchwork of state laws. So I think we're very close with having digital music providers, AI tech companies, creators, child protection groups, et cetera, come to an agreement on a base bill that can then move forward. And we'll talk about artist engagement on that in just a second. The third issue, which is really boring but really important, is record keeping and transparency. The reason why it's important is because creators can't assert their copyrights in court unless they can show that a copy's been made. So because that output doesn't match the training input, it's very hard to tell by listening to Zanaya Monet that Kalani's song was actually used to train. How do you prove that? Well, you have to ask, did you use Kalani's song to train your output? And if they don't tell you, how do you get into court to enforce your rights? Let's just say that a simple request does not lead to a forthcoming response on what is used to train these services. And so a lot of state legislatures and federal bills are focused on requiring AI services to disclose their training material so that people can then show that a copy's been made to enforce their rights. And a lot of detection technology is being used to see whether or not, if you can't get it through the law, you can then detect through technology what the training material was based on the output, so you can then use that in court to go exercise your rights. No, if you can't enforce your rights, you have no rights at all. Finally, the other biggest issue is copyrightability. That song that Zanaya Monet came out with, that song that you heard from Velvet Sundown, does somebody have a copyright in that song? So far, the answer is no. That there has to be a quote unquote sufficient amount of human contribution in order for the song to be copyrighted. Otherwise, the AI company or the person who used the AI company with a prompt could declare a copyright in this. The Supreme Court just denied hearing a case that the appellate court ruled on, which did deny copyrightability to a purely AI piece of art. So far, the government has been pretty clear that if something's purely machine made, you're not going to get a copyright on it. This is really important, but it also is going to become more and more nuanced. What does sufficient human contribution mean? Lots of songwriters are using AI, lots of artists are using AI tools, and at the end of the day, the output may reflect their artistic intent and expression. So We're starting to see some nuance here. Some of you may have heard a Randy Travis release that he did with a producer in Nashville. He has aphasia, so he can't really speak much anymore. But he wanted to record a new song that he helped to co-write with his own voice. So they used AI with permission, of course, and his input and contribution, and they produced a song with his voice, with his permission. The Copyright Office said, yes, that is copyrightable. So we're going to start to see what that means and how much human contribution is required. So those are sort of like the four general buckets of issues under this umbrella of licensing in the marketplace. If you go to the next slide. Artist engagement has been incredibly important in pushing all of these different initiatives, especially legislatively. So in Nashville, when the Elvis Act was being done, artists from, Evanescence to Christian artists like Natalie Grant all testified. The signing ceremony had Luke Bryan and Chris Jansen and, lots of artist engagement. Next slide. The No Fakes Act was the same. This is the federal bill where everybody seems to be working together. Lainey Wilson testified in the House. Twiggs and Martina McBride testified in the Senate. So I think you're going to continue to see a lot of artist engagement, which brings a lot of attention, at least to the creator side of these debates. Next slide. And what was formed a few years ago at South by Southwest was something called the Human Artistry Campaign. If you haven't heard of it, it was sort of 7 core principles about creativity and artificial intelligence. The first is that this is not Napster, that this is something that's here to stay and can be very useful to artists, and we're going to embrace it. However, we have to make sure that we secure our rights using this technology. So next slide, you can see that it is now the largest creative coalition ever formed. There's over 188 members of the Human Artistry Campaign in over 35 countries. So it's a truly global coalition of organizations that push for creators' rights, that work together so that in whatever country they are grappling with the issues in any of those 4 buckets, everybody can join together on these campaigns. Next slide. On the No Fakes Act, a full ad was taken out, and I think will be again, showing artist support. This is a full page ad in USA Today that had something like 380 artists in alphabetical order, from the most famous to emerging. So just to give you a sense of the type of artist engagement that exists on these issues, it's probably the most I've ever seen on any issue. And there's a good reason for that. Next slide. What we did at RIAA, and many others have done it as well, is we wanted to poll the public to see what they think, both about AI generally and especially about creators and AI. So in 2024, we hired a Democratic pollster to poll Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. And then in 2025, we hired a Republican pollster to poll Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, because we wanted to take out of the equation any difference between who the pollster was. And we wanted each to poll each demographic to see if we could get some consistency in the results. And the numbers are pretty staggering on the demand in the public for strong guardrails to protect both people, their privacy, and to protect creators and their property. When you get numbers like 92% wanting more regulation and guardrails around AI, when you see like more than half the people saying that music made by AI will be boring and generally make music worse, those are sort of the 2 polls. And look at the numbers in between about protecting creative works, trying to make sure, on everything from energy costs to jobs, that AI doesn't disrupt so much that it has a negative impact on things that people find very, very important. So fascinating results. This is not Napster, right? From a public perception point of view, this is the opposite of Napster. Next slide. So I don't know if some of you saw this. I think it was yesterday or the day before. Hypebot did a survey of 1,100 musicians and producers. And it really did, I think, provide some surprising insights on what the creative community thinks about AI. 56% said, yes, we like AI when it comes to efficiency, but no on enhancing creativity and quality. Only 22% of musicians and producers out of the 1,100 that were surveyed said that AI enhanced creativity and quality, right? But 56% said it did help with efficiency. There's a huge concern regarding originality. 20% were positive about sort of originality with the use of AI tools. 80% were split between neutral and outright negative. That's a that's a giant split. Um, and then the industry's, yeah, I agree, 22% is a lot. The industry's landing on major automation with human oversight, right? That's sort of, I think, where Hypebot sort of saw the landing zone here is, um, right? Major automation is fine, but human oversight is essential, right? The machine handles the math, the human handles the magic. That's how Hypebot kind of described the results of the survey, which I just thought was really interesting. All right, next slide. I want to spend most of the time here, obviously, taking your questions, but I would be remiss if I didn't end by saying, regardless of sort of whether we're in the courts or the legislatures or the Copyright Office, and whether we're partnering or we're going to sort of fight on different elements of this. What's happening in the marketplace right now on licensing is sort of a hockey stick like we haven't seen before. The number of deals that are being announced every day is somewhat staggering, especially compared to sort of the streaming era, where it was, months or years in between, a few services that were rather consolidated, and over time, millions of tracks sort of added as technology allowed. This is very different. It's much more rapid, a lot more tracks at startup. I think that the question going forward is going to be, what do these licensed services look like, right? Will a walled garden service take off? Will people like it? Will it end up cannibalizing, et cetera? So those are some of the questions that we'll be discussing at part two in May in Atlanta at Music Biz. And I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it, because in many ways, the folks at Music Biz and their members are that connection between distributing to the fan. And so your perspective is going to be really, really important. So I hope to see you there. And in the meantime, if you guys, Sam, I don't know if you've been following the questions, but I'm happy to answer any for the time that we have left.
We do have a couple of questions trickling in. Folks, now is the time. If you've got any questions for Mitch, feel free to drop them either in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to them now. But before we do, we just want to extend our sincere thanks to you, Mitch, and to the RIAA for today's presentation. It's a great overview on this ever-changing and all too important topic. And thank you again for queuing up. This is just part one of two of this conversation, as it is ever-changing. So if you will be at Music Biz 2026 in Atlanta, we look forward to hosting you at our AI-focused program and breakfast buffet on Tuesday, May 12th. We'll get into some of those questions now. This first question comes in from Michelle, who asks, going back to our early example with Hank Hill covering Garth Brooks, is it possible to audition a distinctive voice on an original song, not a cover, to see how a style of voice might sound on one's original track for demoing purposes?
So a lot of songwriters are now doing this, where you are trying to pitch a demo to a particular artist to cut it, or, to a label to use with a particular artist or group of artists. I have heard from many artists and producers that sometimes the artist thinks it's really cool because they can sort of picture their voice on it and it's helpful. And sometimes it freaks them out and they don't like it at all because it sort of skews stylistically how they would envision a performance of a particular song. So is it okay? Yes, I think that that is actually one of the good uses of voice dub, as long as obviously everything is done with consent. There's other really efficient uses of people's voices, not the indistinct kind that you talked about, but more distinct ones. So, like for example, Taylor Swift used to have to sit there for, I don't know, 3 hours and say, "Hey, this is Taylor. Thanks for listening to WK, blah, blah, blah. Love you." Uh, Now, right, they can sort of do a script, use her voice. She can do 320 different radio stations without ever sitting in the chair, right? But in an authorized way that's very efficient and helpful. So there's demos, translation into other languages, right? When Billie Eilish did the song for a James Bond film and they were dubbing the movie into the Japanese language, for example, they didn't dub the song. Now, with Billie Eilish's permission, the song could be sung in her voice in Japanese if she wanted. So, what this means for voice actors, what this means for folks who engage in those works, right, and their jobs, I think remains to be seen. What this means for genres like, you know, commercial music, EDM, et cetera, I think also people are very worried about. But those are some interesting and good uses.
Noel writes in and asks, can you please tell us what digital service providers that you're aware of are filtering out AI content? I know this is something that is kind of evolving day by day here.
So each digital music provider has its own makes its own decisions about what they do. My understanding is that Spotify is filtering out some, but I don't know. I have no idea what their threshold is. Um, you know, I think one of the biggest problems, honestly, for all the digital music providers is that they open their platforms completely to aggregators like DistroKid, TuneCore, et cetera, almost indiscriminately. So, if DistroKid wants to put a song on your platform, they put the song on your platform, and then you kind of have to deal with it based on your relationships, based on your storage costs, based on your algorithm, based on your fans and your customers. So I do know that Deezer's doing a lot of disclosure. Um, and they have put a cap on the amount of AI songs that they will allow, and they won't push it in an algorithm. But I don't know what the rules and the guardrails are for each. I do know that each has its own and is considering on an ongoing basis what to do about the amount of AI songs that are put on.
Steve writes in and asks, does the RIAA have a position on walled gardens? Should AI assisted music be in wide distribution?
So we don't really have an opinion on any kind of licensed model. That's for the owner of the music to decide with their new AI partner. I mean, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, fans decide what they like and what they don't like. I do think that a walled garden is a really good kind of like first test. That's just my personal opinion to see whether or not people within an app environment, um, will play with and listen to that kind of music within that app, but still keep their subscription to Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon Music or whatever. In other words, I think it's an interesting test in the marketplace to see whether or not people are willing to pay for both an AI walled garden app and, you know, a DMP walled garden app, which, they are walled gardens as well for the most part. And so, if both can thrive, I think that's an interesting test in the marketplace. And I'm really glad that companies are experimenting and trying to sort of see what works. I think technology has to get to a point for cutting deals going forward. A lot's going to depend on technology for attribution, royalty administration, because you're talking about getting paid for training. So that raises lots of issues where technology has to sort of catch up. And we at the RIAA do a lot of testing of technologies where we'll put out a request for proposal and people will come and say, "Hey, I think my tool does a good job of detecting input for AI. We will test it using lots of blind tests, and then we'll report on the results to our companies. So we don't make any decisions about what gets used and not used and what gets licensed, but we do facilitate information, if that makes sense, for those who do want a license.
Chris writes in and asks, when AI is used as a songwriting tool to generate music or lyrics that an artist later revises and records with human musicians, what potential attribution or credit obligations might exist for the AI platform and the songs that the model was trained on?
Boy, that's great. So I would say that since what you're pitching is the underlying composition that really was written by the songwriter, right? And the artist is going to be doing their own performance since there's no copyright in the performance on the demo, which is why that copyrightability question is important. I don't think there's much of an issue, right? The copyright will exist for the songwriter and the publisher on the underlying composition and for the artist and the label on the performance of the song. And we just kind of then lose the vocal performance that was on the demo that was generated by AI because there's no copyright in that particular performance.
Next question comes in from Allegra, who asks, how do you know when your voice has been used for any other songs in an AI generated capacity? Is there any way to know this?
Great. So this is one of those technology dependent questions where there are some who claim to have tools based on sort of previous recordings taken from artists where they can detect when it's used. WME and CAA have been very active in sort of working with their rosters, both on the acting and on the music side, to sort of volunteer, have them come in and you basically do different voice modules that are then used. So it's kind of like on your phone when you're trying to have it scan your face for facial ID recognition so you can open your phone without typing in a number. Similar types of tools are being used for voice and for likeness so that then when you see something and you're like, is that me? You can then use that tool to run it through and see whether or not you can find a match. And then you have to sort of prove reliability if if you have to go to court. So it's happening, but it's going to take some engagement on behalf of the artist who wants to be protected.
Next
Yes.
question is from Janet, who asks, what is the impact on commercial music libraries used in film or TV for background music?
I've actually spoken with several commercial music companies based in LA who work mostly with the motion picture industry in producing and providing particular works, especially for like theme songs for TV shows and for segments in motion pictures. And so far, directors of motion pictures, when it comes to particular music, when it incorporates a whole song or something that's integral to the film, are still using RFPs for commercial music companies. And I personally hope that that doesn't change because I think it's a huge part of the art of the whole movie. But they've also told me that things that they might have done that were smaller, like, give me 18 seconds of scary music for this particular scene, they're not being asked to do anymore. So potentially that's being taken over by AI. I also think it's significant how many production music companies have sold their catalogs to AI companies. I don't know if they figured it was easier. I don't know what was underlying the business decision, but obviously one of the first sort of catalogs that are easy to replicate with AI are those that were contained by production music companies. And I know that there's many in Nashville and other places. So I haven't heard from the ones in Nashville yet. We haven't been able to sort of congregate them together and talk to them to collect that information, which is something we like to do. But so far, so good on the movie part. Yeah, Karen, I think you have a good perspective on that. Oh, and Christina
Danielle,
Callio, hello. Christina put something in the beginning. We were in leadership music together in 2010, and she was one of the very first people on who was like helping with the transformation to digital music. So great to hear from you.
Danielle asks, What if anything, can we do to track the royalties generated from AI content received from labels, streamers, and platforms to ensure artists are receiving royalties due from AI usages?
Great question. So under I mean, all we know is sort of what's been publicly said by those who have cut the deal. So, both Universal and Warner put out statements when they cut the deal with Udio that that it would be opt-in, meaning that the artists on their roster would get to decide whether or not they wanted their music used for training. And then if so, then I'm not privy to whatever economic model they have worked out, but obviously that information would be part of the decision for an artist as to whether or not to opt into the deal. These are early days, and it's always a chicken and egg. Even though we don't have the technology to perfectly help with royalty attribution yet, I'm glad these deals are being cut because it's important, especially for policymakers, to know that the marketplace and licensing can address this issue, and with technology over time, it will mature and morph. But I also think that it's going to be very hard, especially in the beginning, because you might have a reference copy that might be 50% of the output that's easier to track. But what about, a much smaller piece that you can't really detect that isn't the reference copy? Is that just lost in the beginning? Is it able to be attributed later? I think all those things have to go into the decision of the artist as to whether or not they are willing to sort of jump in at this stage and allow their work to be used for the training.
Samira writes in and asks, do you have any thoughts on the Sonic Intelligence Academy and their AI music charts, if you're aware of them?
I'm not aware of them, but I'd be happy to learn.
Karen writes in with a forward-looking question. Do you think that there will eventually be a PRO established for AI music?
For AI music, I don't think so for music because in the music world, we have adapted already to the social media and streaming world so that we have opt-in blanket models, right? So we have a Merlin for indie music. We have PROs on the publishing side for songwriters. And then for audiovisual works, we have the NMPA model licenses. They're all opt-in, but they get like 65, 70% of the market. And I think that that offers both a model and a tool for other sectors in the copyright world to copy. I do think that if you're in the book world, the article world, anything where you have one particular copy that can be used forever, that's to be differentiated from news. News is very dynamic, and it's valuable sometimes for like 12 minutes. And so AI services need a constant feed of news from a company like Reuters or New York Times, et cetera, which it almost makes licensing a little bit easier because having a direct pipe and being privy to the latest without having to scour all the time makes it, I think, a more valuable licensing environment, creates incentives for licensing for AI companies. Music or books or film, you copy it once, you've got it forever, and you can exploit it forever and potentially cannibalize the underlying work. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the book world or in other copyrighted worlds, they kind of copied the model opt-in licensing system that we've already created in the music industry.
Got about 4 or 5 more questions. Mitch, do you have a hard stop at the end of the hour, or can we take all of these? Let me
No,
know what
take
works
them.
for you. Great.
Yeah, take them. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And thanks, folks, for being so engaged and dropping all these in. This is the most questions we've gotten on a webinar in a very long time, and it totally makes sense. This is a very, very intricate and ever-evolving topic. Ashley writes in and says, there are some companies attempting to monetize AI's use for the original creators and gives the example of Monarch creating a monetizable style right. In theory, this is a great idea, but in practice, how would this work? Who would be the payer to the creators whose styles have been used to create a new work? And could a company even enforce Suno or the like to pay a fee for the styles they were trained on?
Such a great question. I think style is a very difficult Um, it's just a very difficult question. We're dealing with it a little bit in voice and likeness, like should it be voice, likeness, and style? Like, for example, what if somebody like does a riff in the style of Jimi Hendrix? Is that something that is able to be pegged from an intellectual property point of view? Um, I don't think that that question is going to be decided in the law. I do think that there are going to be technologies like Monarch that offer royalty administration solutions for licensing deals where people want access with pristine content and the imprimatur of the artist or the artist's estate in order to market themselves. And I think that's going to be the impetus. Those two things together, that marriage together, I think is going to be the impetus for especially musicians and others, uh, almost like branding is sort of like a giant piece of what an artist does today. So I think it's more of a licensing and a technology question than it is a legal question at this point. But that's a phenomenal. I mean, you've like put your finger on a button that people are still trying to figure out.
Next question comes in from Victoria, who writes, as a music aggregator, what compliance and due diligence measures should be taken when an artist submits music that has been generated or assisted by AI for distribution on DSPs, considering some DSPs are currently filtering AI generated content on their platform?
Boy, this so I can tell you what I think, which is that I think that uh, aggregators like DistroKid and TuneCore, et cetera, should do what the Copyright Office does, and they should ask the person who is, paying the 9.99 to upload the particular recording, was this generated with artificial intelligence? And if so, disclose how, right? Was it done with a prompt? Was it used as a tool to help you produce, et cetera? Because that at the very least, that information should be available for the digital music platform to implement their own policy and for for other artists and creators to be able to access and to have that knowledge. So I think at the very least, transparency in that regard ought to happen. You can't register a copyright today without disclosing what parts of it are generated by artificial intelligence. And I think that it would really help if the aggregators took on that role at a minimum. Going beyond that for guardrails, I think that they should be working with the digital music providers since they have access to their platforms to place that music on there to help the digital music providers implement the policies they're trying to implement, whether it's a streaming fraud policy, because they're fighting bots, whether or not it's, their own policy about how much AI music they want to allow on their platform. Um, and whether or not they make decisions about whether to include AI generated songs in their algorithms that they're recommending to people that listen to certain types of music. It's very aggravating for a human artist to have somebody listen to their song. And then after somebody listens to it, at the bottom it says, if you like this, you might like these other songs. And several of them are AI generated, right? That's sort of to me, that's evidence against it being fair use in the first place, because it is literally asking you to go to a similar song that is substitutional for listening purposes and has a negative economic effect on the original human artist. So, lots of things I think that they could be doing if they had the will to do it.
Nikolai writes in and asks, in terms of licensing, where do you see value being created? From licensing for training the base model, or artists or songwriters allowing their songs to be referenced, such as AI remixes, quote unquote, in the style of tracks, voice clones, etc., or even the use or streaming of AI songs.
So I think it's all of the above, and I think it depends on what genre of music you're talking about. But we may see in EDM, for example, an evolution towards revenue coming from licensing with remixes, for example, along with sort of regular songs that are released. I think that the deals that we've seen so far have been pretty ingenious, frankly, and unique. We'll see what revenue streams flow from them. But in the No Fakes Act, very importantly, unlike in other jurisdictions around the world, it would allow an artist or an actor to actually license their voice. Now, it's their right, so they get to decide whether to do it, and there have to be safeguards for, you know, kids under 18. You don't want somebody giving their voice away for the rest of their life for $4 or something like that. But and there are those safeguards in there. But the ability of somebody to actually earn revenue from the use of their brand, their voice, their likeness, and I think in the marketplace, their style is also very important. So I would say all the above on that multiple choice.
Roger writes in and asks about the legality of a new clever phenomenon happening from labels in Asia. They're generating hundreds of AI instrumental songs, choosing the best ones, and then taking them into the studio to do a quote unquote cover with real musicians slash Pro Tools. AI is the songwriter, but no one knows this, that they can copyright and protect their recordings. How
Yeah.
does that work in a legal sense?
So I know that especially in Korea, because of this and some other circumstances, there has been a huge sort of backlash from the creator community against sort of this kind of AI generation, especially on the songwriting side, on the bass side. I think just in MBW yesterday, the day before, they talked about the giant backlash and the coalition that was formed at least in Korea on this issue. I, I think that there are some severe legal issues with it under Korean law, depending on where people are trying to collect the revenue. But I think mostly it's an issue for songwriters, um, sort of putting on the pressure, honestly, on these companies. It's a little hard because a lot of, in the United States, the manager works for the artist. In many Asian countries, the artist works for the manager, and the manager is the one that has the rights, and the artist is sort of just under salary and contract. So that layer makes it even harder for them to sort of express their legal rights, which may be just contractual.
Benita asks in and writes, from a marketing and publicity perspective, how do you see AI music being marketed or promoted alongside human artists?
So I thought it was really interesting to look at the difference in the numbers that existed between Velvet Sundown and Zanaya Monet. Velvet Sundown not signed to a label, Zanaya Monet signed to a label. And, this is just one example, and who knows if that's really the difference maker. But Zanaya Monet, somebody paid her $3 million and therefore has a marketing mechanism behind her pushing her songs out, and the streams keep going up and she keeps charting. And so, whether or not more indie labels will keep signing quote unquote AI artists, I don't know. I don't know what the future of that is. I think some of that will depend on how much AI music is allowed on platforms and how much dilution sort of occurs. I do think that one sort of natural market pressure is that we already have a system in the streaming world, which you guys know better than I do, where, I don't know if the numbers are exact, but like 10% of the listens get 90% of the revenue, right? And 90% of the stuff that's uploaded gets 10% of the revenue. And so AI generated music could make that chasm even worse, right? Where, you know, a tiny fraction of hopefully mostly human made music gets all of the revenue because we are just flooding services with potentially, hundreds of thousands of more tracks every single day, which at some point makes it impossible for the fan to be able to differentiate. You have to rely more on algorithms, which means that the DMP has to decide what its policy is going to be with AI music and what it pushes to its fans and consumers. So I think it's still developing. I think what Deezer's disclosing is actually helping people on all sides of this make decisions, but it's going to evolve pretty quickly.
And our last question for today kind of dovetails into that point very nicely. Maria asks, Do you think music companies will start outright banning music or content made entirely by AI, just like Bandcamp recently did? Or will it be the opposite, that they will embrace more of this content?
Oh, this is a really hard question. I honestly, I think it depends on whether or not the artist who, they're partnering with artists and investing in artists. I think it depends on what the artist delivers to them. If it has a lot of AI components, but it ends up expressing the artist's intent and what the artist wants to create, and what they want to share with the world, then I think that they will do everything they can to sort of embrace, market, promote, and distribute it, as their partner. If it's sort of like record companies not doubling down on humans and investing in humans and just sort of like moving over to I don't see that happening. I think record companies, you know, they invest in artists. It's a little bit different than a motion picture where you kind of have the script and like the talent, right? In the music world, the artist is the director and the actor. So I don't see record companies like shifting away from investing in the human artist, but I do see the human artist evolving in how they use AI. I hope that was an answer to your question.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much, Mitch, for joining us today. Really appreciate you having you on the webinar series to walk through this topic. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time and all of your questions. This was an awesome session. So thank you so much. We hope to see you at our next webinar in 2 weeks, and we really hope to see you at Music Biz 2026. Again, that AI focused program and breakfast will be on Tuesday, May 12th. Have a great rest of your day. Reminder to check the recording of this webinar out on the link in our chat. We will also email it to everybody who attended today. Everyone take care, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me.